Nestled high in the hills of Beverly Hills, Falcon Lair once stood as a testament to Hollywood's golden age. The sprawling estate, built by the legendary silent film star Rudolph Valentino, became an icon of his success and his untimely demise. Yet, over the decades, whispers of Falcon Lair's haunting presence have grown louder, turning the glamorous mansion into a place of dread. It began with a warning. When real estate agent Lisa Connor showed the property to her clients, a young couple from Chicago eager to live among the star's legacy, she casually mentioned the mansion's ghostly reputation. "People say Valentino never left," she said with a nervous chuckle. But as they toured the grand yet decaying property, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes were watching. The couple, Jack and Emily Harper, dismissed the warnings as part of Hollywood lore. They moved in that spring, eager to restore Falcon Lair to its former glory. But it wasn't long before the cracks in the house and their nerves began to show. On the first night, as Emily unpacked boxes in the kitchen, she heard the faint sound of footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. "Jack," she called out. No answer. She walked into the hall, heart pounding, but it was empty. Shrugging it off as the house settling, she returned to her work. But the sounds didn't stop. Over the weeks, they grew louder, unmistakable footsteps pacing the halls, even when Jack was away. Lights flickered inexplicably, plunging rooms into darkness. Doors that were securely shut would creak open, as if someone or something wanted to join them. Jack, ever the skeptic, insisted there was a rational explanation. "Old wiring," he said. "Drafty hinges." One evening, as they were settling into bed, Emily awoke to the sound of soft music. She sat up, straining to listen. It was faint but clear, the haunting melody of a piano drifting through the house. She nudged Jack awake, and together they followed the sound to the grand ballroom. The room was empty, save for Valentino's antique piano. Its lid was closed, yet the music persisted. As they stood frozen in the doorway, the melody stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Jack dismissed it as a trick of the wind, but Emily wasn't convinced. She began researching Falcon Lair's history and discovered unsettling details. Multiple owners after Valentino reported strange occurrences. One tenant swore they saw Valentino's figure standing at the window, gazing out over the city. Another claimed to hear whispers in Italian, accompanied by the scent of roses, Valentino's favorite flower. Emily's unease turned to terror one fateful night. Jack was working late, and Emily decided to brave the mansion alone. As she walked down the hall to check the locks, she noticed something peculiar. A faint shadow moving against the far wall. It wasn't hers. The shadow had the distinct silhouette of a man wearing a wide-brimmed hat, just like Valentino's iconic look in The Chic. Frozen in place, Emily watched as the shadow slowly turned toward her, though no figure cast it. Then, in a rush, the hallway lights flickered and went out, plunging her into darkness. A low whisper filled the air, just behind her ear. Though she couldn't make out the words, the voice was unmistakably male and chilling. Screaming, she fled to the safety of her car, refusing to return until Jack arrived. The next day, they brought in a paranormal investigator, who conducted an overnight session in the home. He emerged pale and shaken, refusing to speak about what he encountered, only muttering, "This place is not empty." The Harpers left Falcon Lair shortly after, abandoning their dreams of restoration. Today, the mansion remains uninhabited, a crumbling relic of a bygone era. Locals claim they still see lights flicker inside, and passing tourists sometimes hear faint music floating down the hillside. Falcon Lair stands as a reminder that some legacies refuse to rest. For those brave or foolish enough to enter, the question remains. Is it merely the weight of history that chills the air, or does the ghost of Rudolph Valentino still pace the halls, waiting for an audience that never leaves? Despite the Harpers' hasty departure, Falcon Lair didn't remain silent for long. A team of documentary filmmakers, drawn by the mansion's dark reputation, secured permission to film there. They hoped to capture the paranormal activity on tape, confident their cameras and microphones could pierce the veil of mystery. Among them was Sarah Blake, a sharp and skeptical cinematographer. Ghosts are good for ratings, she quipped, though her unease grew as they set up their equipment. The house seemed to breathe around them, doors creaking without cause, the faint scent of roses lingering in the air, and the unnerving feeling of being watched. The first night of filming was uneventful, leaving the crew restless and irritated. But as the clock struck 3 a.m., the so-called witching hour, things began to change. The cameras positioned in the ballroom captured an anomaly. On the playback screen, they saw it. A faint, shimmering outline standing near the piano, its hand resting on the lid. It didn't move like a person. Its edges wavered, like heat rising from pavement. Sarah rewound the footage, staring in disbelief. "That's a trick of the light," she insisted, though her voice wavered. The sound engineer, Tom, disagreed. "Then explain this," he said, playing back the audio from the same moment. Underneath the ambient noise was a voice, low and melodic, speaking in Italian. Though none of them could understand the words, the tone was unmistakably sorrowful. Determined to debunk what they'd seen and heard, Sarah grabbed a handheld camera and ventured into the ballroom alone. The others protested, but she waved them off, her stubbornness outweighing her fear. As she stood by the piano, she asked, "Is anyone here? Show yourself." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then the piano let out a single, haunting note, as though an invisible hand had pressed the key. Sarah stumbled back, her heart pounding. The room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with tension. Suddenly, she felt something brush past her, and when she looked down, the edge of her scarf was swaying, as if tugged by unseen fingers. Panicked, she ran back to the group, clutching the camera. When they reviewed the footage, they saw more than Sarah had described. The shimmering outline appeared again, this time moving slowly, crossing the room toward her before disappearing. But what chilled them most was her scarf. On the tape, it didn't merely sway. It lifted, held aloft by an invisible force before being dropped. The crew decided to cut their losses and leave. But as they packed their gear, Tom noticed something odd. One of the static cameras, which had been running the entire time, now showed something new. A figure standing at the mansion's grand entryway. It wasn't shimmering or translucent, it was solid. A man in a wide-brimmed hat and a tailored suit, his face partially obscured by shadow. He didn't move, but his presence was undeniable, as though he were silently watching them. The crew turned to look at the entryway, but it was empty. When they turned back to the screen, the figure was gone. Sarah refused to speak about the experience for years. The documentary was never completed, the footage locked away, though rumors of its existence continue to circulate. Falcon Lair remains, as ever, a haunting enigma, and those who dare to venture near tell of seeing a figure at the window, or hearing faint piano music on still nights. The question lingers. Was the figure on the tape a memory of Valentino himself or something far darker, bound to the mansion by forces no one dares to confront? Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. Months after the filmmakers abandoned Falcon Lair, the mansion stood quiet, at least on the surface. But locals began noticing strange activity on the grounds. Late at night, drivers on the winding hillside road reported seeing lights flickering in the windows, even though the property was supposed to be empty. Some swore they heard faint music floating through the air, a melody so haunting it lingered in their minds long after. One night, a young urban explorer named Tyler Mason decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight, a smartphone, and a GoPro strapped to his chest, Tyler climbed over the rusted gate and made his way up the overgrown driveway. "It's just an old house," he muttered to himself, though his pulse quickened as the imposing silhouette of Falcon Lair came into view. The front door was unlocked, as if inviting him in. Inside, the air was thick and heavy, carrying a faint floral scent that Tyler couldn't place. His flashlight beam swept across the grand staircase and the dust-covered furnishings, all frozen in time. He whispered into his phone's microphone, narrating his exploration for his followers. "This place is insane," he said. "Feels like it's waiting for something or someone." As he ventured deeper into the house, Tyler noticed odd things. A cold draft that seemed to follow him, the faint sound of footsteps echoing from somewhere above, and shadows that seemed to move just beyond the edges of his flashlight's reach. When he entered the ballroom, his flashlight flickered and died. "No, no, no, not now," he muttered, fumbling to turn it back on. The GoPro's infrared camera caught what his eyes could not. Later, when the footage was recovered, it showed the faint outline of a man standing near the piano, watching Tyler with an unnerving stillness. In the moment, Tyler felt only the oppressive silence. He pulled out his phone for light and moved cautiously toward the piano. As he reached out to touch it, a sharp sound rang out, a single, jarring note that echoed through the room. Tyler froze, his breath caught in his throat. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, he felt it. A presence behind him, the unmistakable sensation of someone standing far too close. A whisper brushed against his ear, soft and melodic, in a language he didn't understand. He turned abruptly, but the room was empty. Panicked, Tyler bolted for the front door, his footsteps thundering through the halls. But as he reached the entryway, he skidded to a halt. The door, which had been ajar when he entered, was now firmly shut. He pulled at it desperately, but it wouldn't budge. The air around him grew colder, and the sound of a piano playing a slow, mournful tune filled the house. Turning back, Tyler saw the figure for the first time, not just a shadow, but a man. He stood at the base of the staircase, his face partially obscured by the brim of a wide-brimmed hat. His dark eyes locked onto Tyler, and his lips moved as if speaking, though the sound of the piano drowned out whatever he said. Tyler stumbled backward, dropping his phone. The screen illuminated the floor for a split second before going dark. In the faint glow of the GoPro's infrared light, the figure began to ascend the staircase, not walking, but gliding silently, the space between them shrinking with each passing second. When Tyler's screams echoed into the night, no one heard them. The next morning, his abandoned car was found parked outside the estate, its driver's side door wide open. Tyler himself was gone. Rumors spread quickly, drawing both thrill-seekers and skeptics to Falcon Lair's gates. But none dared to cross the threshold. And those who loitered too long outside swore they felt something, an invisible force pressing against them, as if urging them to leave. Falcon Lair remained shrouded in mystery, its allure only growing stronger with each whispered story. But the house had made one thing clear: once its doors closed behind you, they wouldn't open again. Weeks after Tyler's disappearance, Falcon Lair became the center of a media frenzy. Journalists camped outside the gates, and paranormal enthusiasts flocked to the hillside, hoping to glimpse something or someone unnatural. But as the hype faded, the house fell silent once more, its dark windows staring out over the city like lifeless eyes. That silence, however, was deceptive. One evening, a local historian named Laura Kent decided to visit the mansion. Unlike the thrill-seekers, Laura wasn't looking for ghosts. She was drawn by the story of Valentino himself. She had spent years researching the enigmatic star and his life at Falcon Lair. When she heard of Tyler's disappearance, her curiosity overrode her better judgment. Armed with Valentino's biography and an old map of the estate, she slipped through the gates under cover of night. The grounds were eerily quiet, save for the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Laura approached the mansion cautiously, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The front door was ajar, just as it had been for Tyler. She hesitated but pushed it open, the creak echoing in the stillness. Inside, the air was stifling, heavy with the faint scent of roses. Laura's footsteps echoed as she moved through the house, her flashlight beam illuminating faded wallpaper and antique furniture draped in sheets. The house felt alive, as though it was aware of her presence. She made her way to the ballroom, the heart of Valentino's parties and, according to her research, the place he spent his final days before falling ill. The piano sat in the center of the room, its keys dusty and untouched. Laura approached cautiously, running her hand along its smooth surface. For a moment, she felt nothing but the chill of the room. Then, without warning, a soft chord played a single sorrowful note that sent shivers down her spine. "Is someone here?" Laura called out, her voice trembling. She stood perfectly still, straining to hear any response. The air grew colder, and the faint sound of footsteps echoed from somewhere above her. She turned toward the grand staircase, her flashlight trembling in her grip. On the second-floor landing, she saw it a shadow, tall and slender, with the distinct shape of a wide-brimmed hat. The shadow didn't move, but its presence was suffocating. Laura's heart pounded as she tried to rationalize what she was seeing. Shadows didn't stand still. They didn't watch. Suddenly, the shadow began to descend the staircase, not with steps, but with an unnatural, gliding motion. The air grew heavy, pressing against Laura's chest, as if the house itself were trying to force her out. She stumbled backward, nearly dropping her flashlight. "Valentino," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The shadow paused, tilting its head slightly, as though acknowledging her. For a moment, Laura felt a flicker of hope, a connection to the man she had spent years studying. But then, the shadow moved again, faster this time, closing the distance between them with a terrifying speed. Laura turned and ran, her flashlight beam bouncing wildly as she navigated the dark halls. The footsteps followed her, relentless and unervingly close. She reached the front door, but it wouldn't budge, no matter how hard she pulled. Behind her, the footsteps stopped. Slowly, she turned. The shadow stood in the hallway, its shape more defined now. She could see the outline of a suit, the tilt of the hat, and beneath it, the faintest glimmer of eyes that seemed to burn with a cold, otherworldly light. It raised an arm, pointing directly at her. Then the whispering began. Soft, melodic, and incomprehensible, the words filled the air around her. Laura clamped her hands over her ears, but the sound only grew louder, echoing in her mind. Her vision blurred as the room seemed to shift and warp, the walls closing in. She felt herself being pulled not physically, but mentally into something vast and unknowable. And then, just as quickly as it began, the whispering stopped. The room was silent. The door behind her creaked open, and she stumbled out into the night, gasping for air. Laura never spoke publicly about what happened that night, but her colleagues noticed a change in her. She abandoned her research on Valentino and refused to discuss Falcon Lair. Some said she aged years in just a few weeks, her once bright demeanor replaced by a haunted silence. But one thing couldn't be ignored: the notebook she left behind. Found in her abandoned study, its final page was scrawled with a single phrase, repeated over and over in frantic handwriting. "He doesn't want to be forgotten." And in the quiet hills of Beverly, Falcon Lair still waits, its doors always open for those who dare to enter, and its shadowy host ready to remind them that some legends refuse to fade. Laura's escape from Falcon Lair only deepened the mansion's mystique. Locals whispered about her transformation, and thrill-seekers grew more desperate to uncover its secrets. But no one dared cross the threshold after her chilling account. Falcon Lair, it seemed, had claimed its final warning. That is, until a real estate developer, Matthew Crane, announced plans to demolish the mansion and replace it with modern luxury homes. His declaration was met with public outcry from historians and Valentino fans alike. But Crane was undeterred. "It's just an old, empty house," he said confidently. "Nothing more." On a crisp morning, demolition crews arrived, their bulldozers poised to tear down the once grand estate. The workers, a mix of seasoned professionals and young hires, seemed uneasy as they stepped onto the property. Some muttered about the house's reputation, but Crane dismissed their concerns. "Ghost stories don't stop progress," he said, lighting a cigar as he watched the crew prepare. The first swing of the wrecking ball landed with an earth-shaking boom, sending dust and debris into the air. As the sound echoed through the hills, an eerie silence fell over the site. The workers paused, looking around nervously. Then, without warning, the equipment malfunctioned, engines sputtered and died. Lights flickered, and a high-pitched, grating noise filled the air, like metal being torn apart from the inside. "Reset it," Crane barked, but no amount of tinkering could bring the machinery back to life. Frustrated, he ordered the workers to take a break while he inspected the house himself. As Crane entered Falcon Lair, he was struck by how undisturbed it seemed, as if time had frozen within its walls. The faint scent of roses greeted him, and the air grew colder with every step. "Old pipes," he muttered, brushing aside the chill that prickled his skin. In the ballroom, the grand piano stood untouched, its keys gleaming faintly in the dim light. Crane smirked at the absurdity of the rumors. "Ghosts," he muttered, shaking his head. He reached out to lift the piano lid and froze. The lid was already open, and inside, something impossible awaited. A single, blood-red rose, fresh and vibrant. Crane's smirk faded as a low, mournful melody began to play, the notes resonating as if the piano were alive. He backed away, his bravado dissolving into fear. The shadows in the room began to shift, coalescing into a figure near the staircase. Crane's breath hitched as he recognized the unmistakable silhouette of a man in a wide-brimmed hat. The figure didn't move, but the air grew heavier, pressing down on Crane like a physical weight. "You shouldn't be here," the voice said, soft and melodic, carrying the faintest hint of an Italian accent. Crane's knees buckled, and he fell to the floor, clutching his chest as the room seemed to spin around him. Outside, the workers waited, growing uneasy as the minutes stretched into an hour. Finally, one of them, a burly man named Jake, decided to check on Crane. He entered the mansion hesitantly, calling out for his boss. "Mr. Crane? You in here?" Jake found him in the ballroom, lying on his back with his eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. His face was frozen in an expression of pure terror, and clutched in his hand was the blood-red rose. Crane's death was ruled a heart attack, though whispers of the supernatural quickly spread. The demolition was abandoned, and Falcon Lair was sealed off, left to decay in silence. Over time, the mansion became more than a relic of Valentino's life. It became a reminder, a warning, that some places are not meant to be disturbed. And yet, on quiet nights, those who dare to venture close to the estate swear they can hear the faint strains of a piano drifting through the hills. A reminder that Falcon Lair and the spirit that resides within has not been forgotten. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. Any coincidences with real events or characters are accidental.